Hello and welcome to this special CNBC Africa broadcast. I'm Chris Bishop. Well, it's been a very tough 4 months for Africa. The COVID-19 lockdown has cost economies dearly. Now business and governments, the length and breadth of the continent, are asking the question, how can Africa recover? Well, one answer is investing in digital infrastructure to open up business. Now, that's the premise of this special broadcast. If you're interested in digital and the future of this continent, stay tuned for the next hour. We'll be going live across the continent to Cameroon, Nigeria, Nairobi, and Kigali in search of insights in this crucial story. Here are the speakers who'll be joining us today to tell Africa's technology story.
Alain Ebobisse, CEO of Africa50. Paula Ingabire, Rwanda's Minister of ICT and Innovation. Yolanda Kuba, Group Chief Digital and FinTech Officer at MTN. Amroti Abdela, Regional Director for Africa Initiatives at Microsoft. Akinwale Goodluck, Head of Sub-Saharan Africa at GSMA. Rebecca Inonchong, Founder and CEO of AppsTech.
Now, first up, we have opening remarks by Africa50's CEO, Alain Ebobisse, and also Rwanda's ICT and Innovation Minister, Paula Ingabire.
Thank you for that introduction, Chris, and a warm welcome to all participants. Minister Paula, as our long-term partner, it is always a pleasure to share the stage with you, albeit virtually in this case. I'd like to thank the distinguished speakers who are joining us today for this important discussion. Today's theme is why investing in digital infrastructure post-COVID-19 is critical to Africa's economic recovery. But in fact, ICT infrastructure has always been critical for our continent's development. The coronavirus crisis has just made this more apparent and urgent. The countries that have modern ICT systems in place have been better able to maintain economic activity and address the health emergency. At Africa50, we have long recognized the importance of ICT. It is one of the target sectors in our investment strategy. While we focus on large-scale connectivity projects, we also launched an innovation challenge that aims to help address last-mile connectivity in rural areas, and we were selected by the government of Rwanda as co-developer for the Kigali Innovation City project. Very, very, very important and great project, by the way. We are also a convener, bringing together the public and private sectors to develop projects quickly and efficiently. When governments create supportive regulatory frameworks, as it is the case in Rwanda, the private sector will come, bringing technology and capital. Development financial institutions such as Africa50 can contribute with seed funding, loans, and project development expertise. Collaboration is crucial for bringing the benefits of information and communication technology to our continent, both to fight and recover from the pandemic and also to allow Africa to join the fourth industrial revolution. At Africa50, we are pleased to contribute to this collective effort, and I look forward to fruitful and engaging conversations with you, Chris, Minister Paula, and our speakers on this theme. Thank you.
Good afternoon, good morning to everyone that is following this event. It's an honor for me to be with you today as we award the finalists for the Africa50 First Innovation Challenge. I'll start off by congratulating our finalists who have put together incredible solutions designed to help address last mile rural internet connectivity challenges across the African continent. Rwanda is very excited to be the host of these incredible initiatives as they are piloted and tested and proven viable. This is very much aligned with our proof of concept strategy, through which we invite innovators from across the world looking for a place to test, prove, and scale their solutions to the rest of the continent and the world to consider Rwanda as their birth home. It is also aligned with our vision of becoming a knowledge-based economy for which citizens' access to affordable and reliable high-speed internet is essential. The COVID-19 pandemic has proven that access to internet must be a basic right. Internet is today an indispensable tool for communication, work, studies, the way we conduct business, and generally go about life. Beyond responding to COVID-19 pandemic with necessary measures put in place to protect our communities, our ability to survive and remain resilient to this and future shocks requires a multi-pronged strategy that includes building robust and secure digital infrastructure, digitizing government and private sector services, but most importantly, ensuring that our citizens have access to internet to consume these kind of services and products that we put to their disposal. The timeliness of this initiative can't be emphasized enough, and we're very grateful to our partner Africa50 for really thinking about it and even starting with the core foundation of this digital economy that we all seek for our different countries, and as we seek to find efficient ways to respond and withstand the pandemic. We don't know how long this is going to be with us, and I think this is the right time to start thinking about how we invest in connecting all our communities. When you look at the statistics today in terms of internet penetration across Africa, we stand at about short shy of 40%, 39.3%. For Rwanda, we are around 62.9%. It's our duty to leverage innovative ways to connect the unconnected citizens, as well as this challenge comes in handy to spark these kind of innovations that increase affordable and reliable high-speed internet to the underserved and further bridging the digital divide. I also want to come back to the different participants. I would like to thank them and congratulate all the 673 participants that put in their skills and passion to use as they designed proposals that respond to this challenge of connecting everyone across the continent. We are very excited, but mostly honored to soon host the pilot of the winning solution, and we commit our full support as the government of Rwanda to make it a success, and also to find ways of expanding it across Africa as we expand Africa's digital inclusion. For those that didn't make it, I also have a message for you. Whether you didn't make it to the top 10 finalists, for me, you are all still winners. And as I said before, Rwanda is open to welcoming you to come here and test your different ideas and solutions. And in our particular case, and this is for Africa, there's never too much of anything. We have enough room across the continent to test these ideas, to put them to use, and connect as many people as we can. So I do hope to hear and see you soon. Thank you very much, and congratulations to our finalists today.
Words there from the Rwanda ICT Minister, Paula Ingabire. Now, the Africa50 Innovation Challenge was launched a year ago and encourages tech innovation on the continent. Let's have a little look at how the challenge has unfolded to date. Just a taste of it there. Now later, towards the end of this show, we'll reveal the Innovation Challenge finalists. So stay tuned for that. Before we get to the panel discussion, we're moving into a fireside chat filmed a little bit earlier. Let me start with you, Mr. Ebobisi. In terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, how much has this highlighted the need to improve ICT infrastructure in Africa?
Well, Chris, ICT infrastructure, especially the internet, has proven to be indispensable for maintaining a functioning economy in many countries and in addressing the health emergency. In countries with good internet connectivity, A student could pursue their education online, a merchant could sell via e-commerce platforms, government offices could provide services and businesses. Africa50, my company, could hold virtual meetings and keep functioning. Moreover, information and medical advice on COVID-19 could flow freely to those with internet access or via mobile phone applications, and people could maintain the social connection that is so important during a time of crisis. Unfortunately, while Africa's most advanced countries and cities have some of the necessary ICT infrastructure, others, and especially remote rural areas, are deprived of connectivity and the social, economic resilience it can provide. Investing in ICT is therefore key to generating inclusive growth and building Africa's resilience to such crises. Infrastructure such as broadband connectivity network, data centers is critical, but disruptive technologies are also needed to cater for the specific needs of the African context. We must find business models that are commercially viable and self-sustaining. The price for data and devices must fall to levels where people can afford access. The content and services provided must be suited to Africa's need. This is where applications tailored for the farming communities, schools, rural healthcare, and others are so essential. And a number of local startups and tech companies are innovating in this field. I'm sure that in the next panel, you will be discussing some of these great ideas that are being implemented or already are being implemented in this space.
If I come to you, Paula Ingabire, there's an important point there. You're the Rwanda Minister of ICT. Your country has spent heavily in the last decade in infrastructure to support ICT. What are your plans for the future and how to develop it?
Thank you, Chris. Yes, we've invested massively when it comes to digital infrastructure, including building a fiber backbone network that connects all the districts, the 30 districts that our country has on the border points. And I must say this has really paid off, especially during such a time as we were all grappling with the pandemic. We were able to, as Ale had earlier, mentioned, be able to maintain some business continuity with, some minimal disruption. And that's thanks to these infrastructure investments that have been made by both the government as well as the private sector players within our economy. Now, back to your question, going forward, I think our work is cut out very clearly, to be very honest, in the sense that we still have gaps and a long way to go when it comes to last mile connectivity. And for us, that is important, even as we think about resilience and recovering from the pandemic, in ensuring that last mile connectivity, no one is left behind, making sure that services are available and affordable to everyone. And so that is where we're going to be putting most of our efforts and focus as a government, but also as the Rwandan population, together with our private sector.
I come back to you, Mr. Ebubisi. Now, I mean, how crucial is this investment in digital infrastructure to the recovery of the economies of Africa?
Yeah, it's very crucial. But let me confirm also what Minister Paula said, that we need to build supporting ecosystems where new technologies can be developed. And this is what we are doing together with Minister Paula in Rwanda in the great project called Kigali Innovation City, which we are developing together with Minister Paula team and also Rwanda Development Board, certainly with other partners under the great leadership of President Kagame. And so the investment in digital infrastructure is very, very key, in my opinion, for economic recovery. But the key thing, I believe, is that we need to find a way to increase significant capital investment into the continent's digital infrastructure. So one particular way of doing this is to try to reverse the flow from private capital, which is now fleeing Africa, and to try to make sure that we increase the volume of this investment to come back into Africa. I believe that digital infrastructure is actually a good investment because people can make good money by investing in this type of asset. At Africa50, we are doing so, and there is nothing wrong with making money in investing in digital infrastructure, as long as we can deliver impact and good infrastructure services. There is a couple of ideas that we are implementing. One of these ideas that we discussed even with Minister Pola is called asset recycling, a way for government basically to unlock the capital that is immobilized in some of the infrastructure assets and reinvest these funds into infrastructure. The key, Chris, is really to figure out a way to significantly increase the volume of investment to support the entrepreneurs. But we need to make sure that we have not only the big scale, large scale infrastructure investment, but we also have to find ways to increase investment to create disruptive technologies. And that's one of the things that I'm sure the next panel will be discussing. Thank you.
If I can come back to you now, Minister Ingabire. You mentioned there, opened up a whole point that's a big talking point in Africa right now, this blending of public and private finance to build the infrastructure that the continent needs. How much does that fit into Rwanda's plans for the future?
So as you rightly said, yes, blended financing is, one, it's critical, but it's also something that most governments are looking towards as we think about, rolling out the much needed digital infrastructure that we're looking for. And I mean, at the end of the day, we all recognize that digital infrastructure is an enabler for rapid digitalization. So whether we're talking about backbone infrastructure, data centers, last mile connectivity that will afford remote learning, remote working, healthcare delivery of services. And so for us, what we are doing, and interestingly that you asked the question, we've been working, one of the other partners that we have beyond Africa50 is the ITU as well as UNICEF, where we're working on an initiative called GIGA. It's about connecting schools. And again, the key point here is around this blended financing concept, where we know that government alone will not be able to achieve these ambitious targets. And this is really similar to what we're doing with the Africa50 initiative. And we also know that the private sector is going to need some form of incentives from the government to be able to really ensure that we can roll out this infrastructure massively as we can. And so for us, these are new models of infrastructure development that cater for communities where return on investment is too low and maybe doesn't make a compelling case for the private investments alone. And so yes, on one hand, we've done this with GIGA for school connectivity. We're also doing it with Africa50, which is really looking at last mile connectivity. And we intend to make sure that we are capitalizing on this approach to bring all necessary resources together to bridge this digital divide that we're all passionate about. Thank you.
If I go back to you now, Mr. Ebubisi, in your company Africa50, you chose Rwanda for this pilot project in connectivity. Why did you do that? And also, what are you finding now that you're getting underway?
Yeah, well, Chris, it's quite interesting, exciting initiative, really. Our objective in launching the Innovation Challenge was to identify and leverage innovative and sometimes disruptive technologies to respond to our continent's infrastructure challenge. So what we did is that we said we are open to collaborations that includes large tech companies, but also entities from the startup ecosystems, private investors, and the public sector to bring project to fruition. For the first edition of this Innovation Challenge that we launched, which was indeed the last mile connectivity, we received over 600 solutions, with about 80% of those solutions from Africa. And so indeed, our goal is to deploy the pilot in Rwanda first, working with Minister Pola and her team, and then to scale it to other countries. So, Rwanda has been at the forefront of Africa's digital transformation. I'm not saying this because I'm sharing the panel with Minister Pola, because it's true. Rwanda has put in place policies, legal framework, and fiber optic backbones that permit rapid implementation. And I should also mention, I alluded to that earlier, that we have a partnership with Rwanda government through Rwanda Development Board and also the Ministry of ICT in developing the Kigali Innovation City, which we believe will bring the right synergies to build the ecosystem for the implementation of this project. And then after Rwanda, we hope that because Africa50 is owned by 28 African country shareholders, we can then scale up this project beyond Rwanda to other African countries. But we chose Rwanda first because we believe that it's the right ecosystem to implement this project. Thank you.
Now, I just have one last comment here from the Minister Ingabire. I remember not too many years ago reading a report in The Economist about your country, Rwanda, saying that the idea was to make it into the Switzerland of East Africa, prosperous and connected. On the other hand, how far do you think your country is towards achieving that kind of level of ideal?
Thanks, Chris, once again. I think what we've done, and this is again enshrined in our vision for the country, which is really to transform the country into a knowledge-based economy. But also more importantly, our target is to be an upper middle income economy by 2035, and a high income economy by 2050. Now, when we look at the last 26 years or so after the genocide against the Tutsis, there's tremendous progress that has been achieved within the country. When you look at some of the infrastructure developments that are happening, when you look, at how people are empowered, the kind of jobs that have been created, I think we are getting there. There's a lot of work to be done, absolutely, without a doubt, and that's something that we're very cognizant of as a people, as a government, with our combined efforts. And that's why for us, it's very important to get the right partnerships on board that will enable us to then move into this prosperous and connected country that we seek to be. But when you look really at the different investments that are happening, whether this is foreign direct investments that are coming into the country, whether it's government-backed type of investments, all of this is designed and targeted towards making sure that growth happens, but in an inclusive manner for everyone, even for those that today may be living below the poverty line, ensuring that 5, 10 years, 20, 30 years from now, they are empowered enough, and we have people that we have a very small population, or even possible none, that is living beyond the poverty line. When it comes to connectivity, there are a couple of things. We've just been, a lot of the discussions we're having today around digital infrastructure, and we did talk about it earlier in your very first question, which is really looking at the digital infrastructure investments that have already been made. But I think when we're talking about connectivity, it goes beyond just digital infrastructure. When you look at the CFTA agreement that is in place, that is something that Rwanda is really betting on very highly in terms of how connected we are to the rest of the continent, but also creating value. And so, yes, I must say it's a journey ahead, but it's one that is very optimistic, and we know that we will achieve that.
Well, joining me now from the four corners of Africa are Yolanda Uba, the Group Chief Digital and FinTech Officer at MTN in South Africa, Amroti Abdella, the Regional Director for Africa Initiatives at Microsoft from Kenya, Akinwale Goodluck, Head of Sub-Saharan Africa at GSMA from Nigeria, and Rebecca Inonchong, Founder and CEO of Appstec, joining us from Cameroon. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time and your insights on this show. If I could just start off with the big million-dollar question, I want to go around all four of you to find out what your take is, just to get us started, is that how has this COVID-19 pandemic highlighted the need to improve the ICT infrastructure on the continent? Starting off with you, Yolanda.
Hi, Chris. I think the biggest thing that has happened is just the change in how we work. So in that sense, the decoupling, for example, from a productivity perspective of communication from, for example, location. Now we actually are forced to trust each other for output, which is something that we were scared of for a long time. We spoke a long time about work from home. We always had the technology, by the way. However, we just did not have enough faith or trust in each other to be able to count on each other to actually deliver. That was the first thing. The second thing is, how has it changed? It actually has shown a lot of inequality and actually a very unfair distribution in how democratized really our access really is. So what I mean by that is literally that there are people, a huge chunk of the continent that has no connectivity at all. And then there's another smaller part, which is around between 30 and 40% that does have digital connectivity today, that is able to continue working while the rest is not able to actually continue working. And that applies to education as well. So from an infrastructure perspective, it is clear that we have a huge deficit in where we need to go to in order, for example, for us to get to 1 billion people covered through data-enabled kind of devices. We actually have to invest over $100 billion to 2030. So that just gives you a context of how far back the infrastructure really is in the country.
I go to Nairobi now, and I'm Roti Abdela, the Regional Director for Africa Initiatives at Microsoft. The million-dollar question, how is this COVID-19 pandemic highlighting the need for more investment in ICT infrastructure?
Thank you, Chris. What we've seen in the last 6 months or so has really been a very fast-track adoption of technology. A lot of the understanding and the need is also there, but the development and the investment into of the tools and the platform has always been an investment that was to be made down the road. So COVID-19 has really accelerated the adoption significantly as we look at that. In looking at now what has become very apparent, in addition to the pre-existing social, political that we've had, is also the disparities, both from an infrastructure perspective, which I think has been talked about, but also from a mindset and also an adoption perspective, right? From a policy perspective. So as we look at last mile connectivity options, be it from solutions, be it with technologies such as TV white spaces that we've been championing across Africa, it's now really looking at what are the services we need to look at to deliver for, right? So politically for government and government services, social services, and more importantly, business continuity, to really make sure that we can actually fulfill the promise. I think also the opportunity that we have now in Africa to really fast track a lot of these investments, to be able to make sure that some of the growth that we've seen in the last decade is actually not left behind.
Okay, and I go to Lagos, Nigeria now, and Mr. Akinwale Goodluck, the head of Sub-Saharan Africa at GSMA. Say the million-dollar question, COVID-19 pandemic, how could it be helped by improving the ICT infrastructure? How easy is it going to be, particularly at a time when, as you heard Mr. Ebobisi say there, when capital is fleeing the continent?
Thank you very much, Chris. And, it's really good to be among people who are so passionate about connectivity and innovation. Definitely, we've got a lot of work to do. When you look at the demographics in sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, by the end of this year, we will have close to 500 million unique mobile subscribers, and that's about 45-46% penetration, which tells us that we've got another roughly 500 million people to also connect. We then also look at what I think Minister Paula referred to, would like to call the internet usage gap, where we find that out of the people who are connected, a significant majority are still unconnected in terms of being connected to the internet. So we have a problem not only connecting and bringing coverage, but also bringing people online. With that in mind, it tells us that there's a lot of work to be done. The work will definitely not be done by one party. It will be done by a multi-stakeholder approach to bring the resources that we need in sub-Saharan Africa to connect everybody. Perhaps over the next 10 years, we'll be talking about $100 billion US. We need to build about 250,000 new 4G base stations in sub-Saharan Africa. We need to build, as a minimum, another 250 to 300,000 kilometers of fiber. So it tells us that there's a lot of work to be done, but with the right policy, with the right regulatory environment, it is something that we can surely achieve in sub-Saharan Africa.
And if we move along to Cameroon now, and Rebecca Inonchong, a founder and CEO of Appstec, you have a network that supports something like 500,000 entrepreneurs across the continent. Where do the entrepreneurs fit into this overall picture of ICT?
So AfriLabs is a network of technology hubs across the African continent. We're in over 200 different member hubs, over 45 countries, supporting a community now of over 1 million African entrepreneurs. And so I think that entrepreneurs have been used to using technology. And the good thing about COVID is that now government officials have had to use technology in order to continue their work, and so they're, so to speak, having to eat their own dog food, and realize that in some countries where internet access was equated with social media, which they also equate as revolution, and so if you have less internet, then you have less chance of a revolution. Then you have governments that have finally realized, and government officials, that technologies can actually be a very useful tool. For an entrepreneur, technology is, for a tech entrepreneur anyway, it's the oxygen of our digital economy. And so it's absolutely necessary. So I think that, that COVID has helped in bringing at least the idea to some government officials, reluctant government officials, that this internet thing, it's actually useful.
Okay, and if I go back to Yolanda here in South Africa now, I'll say, how's the money going to be raised for this investment? It's one of the big questions. You heard the minister there talking a bit earlier about public and private participation, but the gap is pretty huge. We spoke the other day, you reckon it was something like $110 billion on the continent. How is that gap going to be financed?
So it will have to be financed by a partnership between government and the private sector and the citizenry, because it's important that everyone understands that there isn't one silver bullet that will actually solve our problems. Just to give you a context, MTN, operating in 21 different countries, actually spends close to around $2 billion a year on our capital expenditure. So if we actually have multiple companies actually spending that kind of money, obviously we'll go a long way in actually making sure that we actually start closing that gap. However, we also have to be cognizant that sector, there is some order to actually fast track the kind of development that we are actually looking for. So from that perspective, I would say all three major components of society have to be part of the equation. Tax incentives, for example, I'll give you an example. For example, in Ghana, if I have to import the base stations into the country, because none of the countries in Africa actually make their own base station, we imported that, and we actually then pay almost 50-60% excise to actually get it into the country. So the taxation of actually balancing between the infrastructure that we need that accelerates growth versus short-term needs actually also needs to have a balancing act that we actually have to deal with.
Going to go to East Africa now and to Amroti Abdillah. How difficult is that balancing act likely to be, especially when it comes to ICT, which is so essential, between government and private money? What's your experience there?
From my experience, Chris, the sort of marrying two is not too difficult, right? And you can look at sort of some of the money that is perhaps preceded by development agencies that are forefronting the investment into the infrastructure. I think what's key is sort of really understanding what are the sort of the win-wins on both sides that can actually be facilitated and targeted and prioritized as we look at this, right? So today we, see COVID and its impact, looking at the education sector, right? And the number of sort of students that are left unconnected, the number of sort of gaps that we're leaving and disrupting is actually enormous. So what are some of the things between the telcos and the ISPs that we have that we can actually put together that allows for the deployment of the connectivity to the last mile, but more importantly, look at also how do we now make sure, as we look at sort of the next generation, that we can actually lay the investment in the foundation today.
And so we can go back to Akinwale Goodluck in Lagos. And we were talking the other day about how still there in this continent there is still that idea that basically a lot of business people on the ground, a lot of the common man on the ground still don't quite see the advantage to their business of going online.
Yes, Chris, that is really true. If you look at the internet map, usage map for sub-Saharan Africa today, typically it's impacted by the barriers of affordability. And when we talk affordability, we mean devices, we mean data bundles. It's impacted by digital literacy, by local and relevant content. And then there's also a lot of concern around privacy and security. But one thing that is really important is that for us to be able to translate all the investment we're talking about here into growing the digital economy, we need to bring people online. And to bring the common man in sub-Saharan Africa online, we need to find that compelling proposition, the sort of proposition Voice had 10, 15 years ago. We must find that proposition that makes coming online profitable for everybody, that makes it useful, that makes it instructive. So it goes beyond just having internet access for entertainment or for watching videos, etc. We must draw a correlation for people to see that if I go online, I will benefit materially. Then we will see people come online and we can begin to achieve the digital economy objectives that we're all talking about.
And if I go back to Cameroon and Rebecca Inon-Chong, I mean, where do entrepreneurs fit into all of this? I mean, you said you have about 1 million entrepreneurs across the continent, many of them young. Surely a lot of the young entrepreneurs coming up, they think online first before anything else. How do you think they're going to drive this overall effort?
I think that they are driving the effort. They're the ones that are building solutions for their communities that are answering the actual needs of the communities. And what we want for those entrepreneurs is to get more support from not just from the government, but also from the private sector, so that they can flourish. Because as we talk about all the infrastructure, and as we talk about how we're going to build that infrastructure, my question is, who is going to build the infrastructure? We need to make sure that Africans are able and have the skills to actually build the infrastructure. And that when we are deploying solutions, that we're deploying African-built solutions. But for us to get to the point where we don't have to import from Europe or Asia, we need to make sure that our young people, our children, have the required skills. And that starts at the education level. I think that in many countries right now, you have, computer classes, but they're actually separated. So you have, a lab that's separated from the coursework. So I think we really need to rethink education to make sure that all of our curriculum has a foundation built in technology, so that technology becomes ubiquitous. It's not something that you do, it's something that you use to do. And so I think that that's where the entrepreneurs would say is that we need more of the use, and we need to be the ones to provide these solutions to our businesses and to our governments. And so the message really is trust your local entrepreneurs. They have the solutions that you need. Hire them, buy from them. And I think that will really support our digital economy.
I come back to Yolanda at MTN here in South Africa. Now, the other day we were having a discussion about this, and it's not going to be any time soon we're going to see any quick results, is it? I mean, you were telling me that the lead time for ICT infrastructure investment is something up to 5 years. How do you think that could be fast-tracked at all?
I think what needs to happen is that shared value kind of model that we all need to actually come together on. From a infrastructure provider like MTN, we start investing, for example, in 5G now, which you've seen in South Africa, for example. But in South Africa right now, there's most probably less than 10,000 people with 5G devices. but you actually are investing today. So you have to have access to the spectrum, you have to have access to the base station and the actual investment that you're doing. So at any one time, we are investing at least 4 to 5 years ahead of demand. And that's why when you actually look at a lot of the countries where mobile operators are actually super strong, when COVID started, none of them fell apart. The reason is that there is so much capacity that we build in our networks ahead of time. So what does that mean in reality? It means that we need government to come in. We need and here I have to actually be careful with my words. Is we need governments to be facilitative in terms of their approach. I mean, in governments, for example, like Rwanda, we clearly see that the government is pushing a specific agenda where they literally are rolling out the red carpet and not the red tape for businesses in order to operate. And therefore, you can see the acceleration that is happening in that country. To give you a practical example, in my space in digital services, in fintech, for example, Rwanda was the first country under COVID to say, the government that is, to say, we will actually support you in making sure that cashless payments actually happen, that you don't have to charge for cashless payments and so on. And so we lost revenue, which was fine because it was our contribution towards COVID relief for society at large under that shared value. However, they actually went a step further to say, actually, regulators, you must actually put in place these kind of regulations in order to make sure that we are able to pull money from a bank into a wallet, from a wallet into a third party and pay for services. So that, for me, that mentality that actually starts talking holistically around digital services, whether they be fintech or other digital services that we actually, everyone has been talking about, that Rebecca was talking about from entrepreneurs, are enabled. That's what we need to do at this stage. And for me, if we can get a government that is actually starting to think about like that, regulators that are starting to think like that, then we will be able to actually go a long way in solving some of the problems. Of course, you will mention data prices. Data prices are just but one component. There are, in the value chain, there are about 6 or 7 steps that needs to be actually rectified. The pricing of spectrum is another one, for example. So, and the scarcity of spectrum in other countries where they have not been auctioned is another issue that is actually making sure that data prices remain high as well. So I just wanted to give you that context.
No problem. If I just want to get a reply to that from East Africa and Amrote. I mean, you're talking about this idea of government getting it, essentially, and facilitating this kind of investment. Now, I understand in your neck of the woods in Kenya that that the government's looking to expand into e-government, which is likely to open up a lot of opportunities for them to fast track some of the legislation and also some of the investment. Just give us a taste of how that's going.
Absolutely. Look, I think, Chris, and maybe to build on what Yolanda said, it's not an option for us not to digitize and to transform. You know, in the past, I think we've talked about how youth bulge and, you know, we must create employment and that we must address that need. That ticking time bomb today in Africa is actually around, it's going to be around connectivity. And I say connectivity, not just in terms of the governance model, but also it's about ability to deliver services. It's also about having an end-to-end view around government, right? Whether you're looking at health around prevention, track and trace, whether you're looking at food value chains for agriculture and food security, the ability of government to truly understand where they have what in terms of being able to understand where they should be dynamically allocating sort of their resources becomes even more imperative at this time. So if anything, what COVID has brought forward, frankly, is the need to make sure that the inequalities that we have, both in terms of digital access and connectivity, but also in terms of being able to now make sure that there is a full provision of services that government can actually respond to, but also be accountable to as well. Whether you're looking at education, and I come back to it because it's such a sensitive topic, right? You have private education that is able to continue be digitally or in some form of a blended model that they will look at in a few months down the road, whereas public schools across the board will actually have to cease, right? And where students will have to repeat a year. So, we start having sort of ripple effects in terms of how we actually do this. And Rebecca mentioned around entrepreneurship. This is the time, right? It's not, again, a luxury and nice to have for us to embrace the startup ecosystem, innovators that we have in Africa. But we actually have to, because these are going to be the young men and women who will actually help us be able to find solutions across the different verticals that we're looking at. And I think one thing I would add is actually around CFTA. Across the board, we've talked about the need to be able to connect our economies and create sort of a borderless transaction opportunity. But that really starts with us being able to have digital platforms for interoperability around e-commerce. And so it's really an opportunity, again, for thinkers and decision makers and policy thought leaders really at this point to say, look, how do we now use the crisis that we have at hand and turn it into a very, very good opportunity to fast track?
Okay, if I just go over quickly to Lagos and Akinwale for a comment on that. We're talking here about how the government should be rolling out the red carpet and stop thinking about red tape. But one of your fears, is it not that ICT companies on this continent might face a windfall tax because of the business they've been doing during the COVID-19 lockdown? Where would that put things?
Absolutely. I think that there's a real reason, or there's need for governments and policymakers in the region not to get comfortable, not to think that because we've got 500 million people connected, the cow is fat enough and you can begin to feed on the cow. I think that there's a lot of work to be done in terms of government understanding the trade-off between the cost of spectrum and its impact on the digital economy. Government cannot say in one breath that we want people to come online and in the next breath begin to tax, like in some African countries, a $7 tax per annum on smartphones, a $1 tax per annum on feature phones. Government must realize that the work has just started. We've still got quite a long way to go. When you look at the progress that Africa has made with mobile money and the impact it has had in terms of bringing people out of poverty, you would be surprised at the number of countries who are now imposing taxes on mobile money transactions, taking us back to where people will begin to keep cash again under their beds. So there's so much work to be done. More recently, we've seen definitely an upsurge or in demand for data and voice services as a result of the COVID-19. But that demand does not necessarily translate into profit and revenue for operators. So, we're now seeing in several geographies in Africa, government is beginning to impose new taxes. And, you use the right word. It is almost seen as a windfall tax, that the ICT companies, the telcos, have made money out of COVID. It is not true, and this is not the time to tax investment. Government can tax profits. Government can help to build a bigger cake, roll out the red carpet, let's build a bigger cake, and then there'll be more people in the digital economy, there'll be more growth, we'll see GDP grow, and of course the tax base will also grow.
Okay, Akinwale. And now we're going to cross over to Cameroon now, and our questions are coming in from our online audience. And the first one goes to you, Rebecca. Now, the person asks, how is this initiative going to ensure that young innovators have access to the opportunities that are anticipated in a connected Africa? Is there also an online platform to create inclusivity for small innovators in Africa?
I think that's actually a question for Mr. Iwobise, since I'm not part of the building of that platform. But what I hope that will happen is that as the platform is being built, it's actually being built by African entrepreneurs. I think so often our governments have this reflex of going and hiring, Indian firms or Chinese firms or European or American firms to deliver services and to deliver products that our African entrepreneurs are able to build. So I think that from my perspective, the hope is that the platform would be built locally. There are platforms that exist now to connect entrepreneurs and investors. For instance, there's VC for Africa. AfriLabs and ABAN, the African Business Angels Network, are also working on a program to connect these two, because we need the funding. These entrepreneurs have great solutions. We've come in with the hubs and innovation centers to support the entrepreneur in building a real business, but they need financial support. And that financial support should, as much as possible, come from local African investors who are supported in some way by government policy, for instance.
Well, the next question from the audience, I'm coming to you, Yolanda. It's about a bit of back to basics, really. The questioner says, we find that investment in water infrastructure is lagging behind other sectors in Africa, and it's also one of the least digitized sectors. Now, beyond just bill payments, how can we use ICT to scale up water availability to the people?
I guess this is the opportunity for African entrepreneurs and startups to actually bring digital solutions to all facets of our economy, including the water kind of space. For me, for example, if we're thinking about how do we actually track and trace where water is, how do we make sure that the losses that we get as a result of leakages and things like that, that's all IoT related. So Internet of Things can help actually solve that. So all these things, there was a time when one of the companies in South Africa, I think it was Covert Water, that actually was losing up to 20% to 30% of the water that they're pumping through. This is after purifying the water. So you spend the cost. Now you're actually losing it, just delivering it to the end consumer. It doesn't make sense. So I think it's just not only water, it's across the board. It's electricity, it's all our basic kind of services, and including education. So, if my plea, I guess, to governments, to private businesses, to individuals, is we need to change our education system. We need to change our education system in order to make sure that we have digital skills. If we don't have digital skills, we are not going to build the capability that is required to actually participate in any of the value chains that we keep on talking about. We are not going to create the ecosystems that enable us to solve African problems with African solutions. And for me, when I talk about education, it always sounds like it's theoretical initially. However, when you look at the stats, it actually starts being baffling. And again, let me pick on South African stats for a moment. Today, grade 5 pupils, little students in grade 5 in South Africa, around 60% of them cannot actually add properly, subtract properly, and multiply single digits. The 69% of grade 6 teachers actually cannot pass the very mathematics paper that they set for a grade 6 student. So when we actually start off there, you can see that we have a real challenge. And really my advocacy on this kind of platform is not just businesses, not just government, us as individuals, us as society, have to be impatient with the kind of outcomes that we are getting from education. If we are not being impatient with these unfair and unfairly distributed kind of outcomes that we see, we are not going to get to an acceleration phase in what we're actually doing. So for me, broadly, it really is around digital skills for all ecosystems that we can create in Africa. With mobile money, we actually showed the world that we can create something from scratch. Remember, mobile money was created in Africa to solve African problems. Again, let's look at how we actually democratized connectivity. And people have forgotten that they used to actually spend weeks or months before they spoke to their loved one on the phone. Today, we've democratized it. You speak to your partner, you speak to anyone, to your mom, to whoever, 10 times a day if you want to. And the reason for that is because Africans, again, came up with prepaid. Prepaid is not a European invention. It was because people in Africa didn't have credit cards, didn't have the track record that is required in order to acquire postpaid services, so they needed to prepay it. And it originated here in South Africa that we actually have prepaid today. Nanotization and micro insurance is also originating from here. Why do we do it? It's because we understand that Africans, a lot of our Africans are daily wages. Some of them work in the agricultural sector, so they are cyclical in terms of their income streams. So we're balancing these things out across the board and bringing African solutions. So education, digital education, and creation of ecosystems is what we need to do in order to succeed.
We go now. Okay, if we're going to East Africa now, and Amrote, quick question from the floor for you here, another back to basics. How can ICT take positive shape with the low literacy rate in Africa?
Look, I think the starting point is in really making sure that we make available sort of the content and the know-how around how to get started, right? I think Yolanda was mentioning, if we build the digital sort of infrastructure and the digital highway, to where, for who, and with who. And so the digital skills building really has to start at the fundamentals. And I think one of the areas we have committed to and continue to do so 7 years on, and now sort of doubling down our investment, looking at COVID impacted unemployed workforce, is making sure that we can make available any content, again, sort of available for free at no cost, and making sure it's sort of the skilling, but also the upskilling is also available as part of the training of the workforce for the economy that will be post-COVID. So I think that would be, so I emphasize again, Chris, the skills building has to truly be at the core of all of it. And it doesn't have to be limited to one industry and one sector, which is ICT, but we have to make that it's part and parcel of all our sectors, right? You're talking about health or agriculture, even, which is one of the more remote industries sectors that we look at. We have to make sure that we really think around what is value added that ICT can bring to make sure that we can close the gap in all our, really sort of move and uplift our economy.
Okay, and I'm going now to Akinwale in Lagos for a question I know we discussed the other day. Somebody asked from the floor, the political interference on the continent is getting into aspects of development. They mentioned Ethiopia cutting off all communications for 3 weeks the other day. Uganda's got high tax on social media, and some countries tapping phone calls. What can be done about this?
Thank you very much, Chris. One of the barriers, again, to internet adoption is trust, is people being confident about their privacy. We see a lot of countries in sub-Saharan Africa getting it wrong in terms of thinking that the internet does not support the objectives of government, that by throttling the internet and shutting it down, you protect the interest of the government. And I think that it's exactly the other way around. Government must begin to understand that the internet is just another platform. It's, the way things function in the real world will also function online. Government must then understand that for a lot of the people, and particularly in Africa, where a lot of the population are young people, this is their preferred space. Government must support, government must build trust, government must, must not throttle the internet, must not impose taxes, must not make it difficult to use, must democratize it, must encourage people to go there. It's the only way that all this investment will translate into growth. Government must see the internet and the infrastructure providers as partners, as people who will help them to realize their objectives. More and more today, we see that, and I think Yolanda and Paula, the minister, spoke about it in terms of, we've been talking about e-education, and then COVID-19 comes and the whole continent realizes that we've got to take education online. We've got to begin to use digital payments to stop physical interactions. There's so much that the internet is going to do. And this is where governments must understand that this is the way to go. It's not by throttling it. It's not by putting more and more barriers. It's not by restricting the availability of spectrum. It's not by creating artificial scarcity of spectrum. It's about putting predictable regulatory and policies in place so that investors are encouraged to invest.
Okay, if I go now to Rebecca in Cameroon in West Africa, it's another question from the floor. Someone's asking, and I'm sure a lot of your entrepreneurs can tell you, please show us the advantages of investing in infrastructure in Africa and what distinguishes the investment in it in Africa with other continents.
Well, obviously we all investment is for future. And if we want our future to be digital, if we want to be part of the fourth industrial revolution, we must invest in infrastructure. But as I said, infrastructure isn't just the physical things. And I think we've talked a lot about education here. If we don't build our human infrastructure, the individuals that will continue to build and maintain these systems, then bringing in machines and propping them down won't solve our long-term problems. But I think that there are, I saw there was a question on water. There's so much innovation around water and how to clean water and access to water that young African innovators have built. It's just nobody's giving them any attention, nobody's giving them any funding, and nobody's buying from them. And when I say nobody, I'm talking primarily about the governments that aren't providing the support that they need, so that the builders and the makers of this infrastructure that's built for Africa by Africans needs to get the attention and the funding from its governments.
Okay, thank you very much. Just hold those thoughts there. And we're going live to Tunis now to hear from Africa50's CEO, Mr. Alain Eboubisse.
Well, thank you, Chris. I think I'm on mute. Yeah, I am. Am I on mute? Chris, thank you very much.
No, I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. It was great, Chris. I really enjoyed this session, and it was very informative to me. And many thanks really to our distinguished speakers, Amrote, Rebecca, my sister from Cameroon, Wale and Yolanda. You're brilliant. Your insights were brilliant, and I think all of us here today have a key role to play in the connectivity space. And we talk a lot about governments, entrepreneurs, and indeed, Rebecca, I agree with you. We need to figure out a way to get a bit more funding to entrepreneurs, because it is by joining our complementary strengths that we can achieve a great impact. The coronavirus emphasized the need to act quickly. I think speed is very important, strategically as well, but more importantly together, because no one else will be able to solve this problem alone. But the coronavirus also, reminded us that there could be no sustainable development if we don't put the human first. And access to affordable internet is key to increasing access to social services and economic opportunities, especially for the most vulnerable. And we have to focus on that. So today, it's a major milestone for us at Africa50. We are announcing the finalists of our Innovation Challenge. However, those who are not selected should not be discouraged, because they will have access to a network. They can leverage our presence in 28 African countries to find new growth opportunities. So they will be part of the family. So this is all exciting. It's a lot of work, but it's quite exciting. Let me finish by thanking our partners, Microsoft, GSMA, who are here with us today, represented by Amrote and Wale. I also like to thank Disruptus and Informa, who were part of the initiative from the early stages, as well as Tactis and Afrobyte. And finally, our institutional partners, the African Development Bank, ITU, Smart Africa, UNECA, the Africa Union, they all join our advisory council. So it was great. We look forward to working together in the next coming months. This is exciting. There's a lot of work ahead of us, but it's quite exciting work because I think that, and somebody was saying, what is the benefit of investing in infrastructure in Africa, digital infrastructure? Well, the benefits are manifold, but one is making money, but the other one is making impact. So you can have the double bottom line of making money and making an impact. So we're all excited about doing this, and thank you again for this very, very informative session.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alain Eboubisse of Africa50 there. Also joining us live from Tunis with news about the Africa50 Innovation Challenge is Fleur Chibota, the Director of Communications at Africa50.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm actually calling from Casablanca, but it's not far from Tunis. This was indeed a very exciting moment for us. We received 673 solutions as part of the Innovation Challenge. We went down to top 60 solutions first that we had our expert panel assess. Then we came down to a top 30. And now it's time to unveil the finalists. And we have 7 names to unveil today. We were really impressed with the quality of the proposals we received, the diversity as well, because we got solutions from Africa, mainly over 80% of them, but as well from all over the world. We had startups who submitted proposals, as well as large tech companies. So clearly opportunities for synergies between these various players. So we really applaud the innovation spirit and the ingenuity that we saw. But beyond the pilot project, like Minister Paula said this morning, like as well Mr. Bobisi said, we want to build an ecosystem with entities that can have complementary strengths, and I think the Innovation Challenge offers that. Beyond just providing the connectivity, is very critical to provide services that make sense for the African consumer living in the rural areas. And we believe through the Innovation Challenge, we managed to unveil some of these solutions. So we look forward to continuing the process. Our investment teams will continue to work with the finalists, conducting further due diligence. And in November, we will be ready to unveil the winners. So stay tuned for that moment. But in the meantime, I'd like to invite you all to meet the finalists through this short video. Thank you.
Well, best of luck to all the 7 finalists there. I'm afraid that's all we have time for, and we come to the end of our broadcast. Thank you very much indeed for watching, and from me, Chris Bishop, and all the team here at CNBC Africa, and my esteemed panelists on the 4 corners of the continent, it's goodbye, and thank you very much indeed for watching. Bye-bye.